Hello Internet, Taliesin here.
And Evitel.
And welcome to our new, I want to call it a mini channel.
Can we call it a sub-channel?
That would imply that our other channel is like our Dom channel.
I mean, I'm into that.
I'm into it too. This is our new sub-channel where we talk about media that aren't video games that we have consumed.
Ooh, like all of it. Anything.
Films, TV shows, books.
Stuff.
And here, in this beautiful set, what do you think about this?
I think it's really nice.
This is our first video, and I thought I'd make it look really nice. Now, we did show this kind of set to some of our patrons, or all of our patrons, and some of the feedback was that it looked too professional, Evitel.
Too professional, too shiny.
You'll be very pleased to know, if it was you that said that, how wrong you were. I feel like us being in shot really drags the quality and the professionalism
really
down.
You
know, like without us, it actually does you right. It looks quite shiny and professional. Something you might notice as the video goes on, it's literally held together with chewing gum and sellotape. Basically, if like a car drives past too fast outside, all of this is going to fall down and crush us.
These are just floorboards like taped to the wall.
If someone knocks on the door, we might not live, frankly. Yeah. We might not survive. So I hope it's worth it. But what are we talking about today, Evitel?
Today we are talking about the Squid Game.
The Squid Game. Did you read about it on the Facebook?
Yes, I did.
I guess you'd call it a survival horror phenomenon. Everyone loves it, apart from the people who don't. Everyone understands everything about it, apart from about the 50% of the population who don't. It's full of action and drama and brilliant characters and controversy, and we're going to talk about it all right now. I
can't wait.
You don't have to wait. It's happening right now. For our sake and for your sake, we're going to be presenting our views on Squid Game in easy-to-digest internet lists.
Snackable content.
Load me up. So let's get going and let's talk Squid Game. Number 1. What is Squid Game?
So, Squid Game is a Netflix series. It's written by Hwang Dong-hyuk about 10 years ago. It was originally pitched as a film and was rejected basically everywhere for about the last 10 years. Recently was accepted by Netflix because they have a huge budget to kind of expand into South Korea and other places, and it has taken off.
Yeah, and it's one of like a number of kind of South Korean dramas that have been finding their way onto Netflix. Squid Game is now like the most watched thing in Netflix history. It's worth about $900 million. That's almost $1 billion in American dollars.
Wow.
It's funny, right? Because like traditionally, $1 billion in British money is different from $1 billion in American money.
Is it like a bajillion?
Well, a British billion traditionally, and this has changed in recent years to like kind of like, you know, match things up. But traditionally, $1 billion in Britain has an extra zero on the end compared to $1 billion in America.
One of the many things that confuses me about living in this country. But hey, maybe that's for another video.
It makes you wonder how the banking crisis ever happened, right? That's what Squid Game is. But Evitel, I've got a question for you. What is Squid Game about on the surface, and what is it really about?
Okay, so when I started hearing about Squid Game, people were like, you gotta watch Squid Game. I saw it pop up on Netflix. I was like, okay, this is gonna be a battle royale.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's kind of like, that's not wrong.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, this is gonna be basically a bloodbath, kind of South Korean flavor, which is something that we're familiar with from other kind of...
Well, that's like a very kind of specific genre in of itself, right? And so, you know, you think of the obvious influences like battle royale, like Hunger Games even, like something like The Running Man.
So that was my expectation going into it, which was fine. And I was like, okay, let's check this out. It's not like super my thing, but people like it. It seems super stylized.
Exactly. And I don't think I would have watched it had there not been like the amazing feedback from it. Because we actually finished the entire series in like the first week it came out. Yeah. But at first I wasn't going to watch it because I thought, it's one of those things you'll watch maybe late at night around Halloween or something like that, and you'll binge it. But I thought,
around Halloween.
because you know, it's like a survival horror thing, right? And I'd seen the pictures, I'd seen how like incredibly stylized it looked with all the bright colours and things like that, and it said to me like, Battle Royale, running game. I thought I had a handle on what Squid Game was, is basically what I'm saying.
But little did you know.
Little did I know it was so much more. And that surprise and my kind of re-evaluation of what Squid Game was actually about kind of came from episode 2 onwards. Because episode 1 is very much what you would expect from that, right?
Yeah, for the most part, it sticks to kind of a tried and true format. And then from episode 2, I remember we both went, ooh.
Ooh, yeah. If someone had asked me what is going to be the structure of episode 1 of Squid Game, me knowing nothing about it, I'd be like, okay, so we're going to see our characters who will eventually take part in the game. We're going to get little snapshots of their life to see how hard up they are, right? Or why they need to take part in the game or whatever. Or, maybe they'll get kidnapped and taken to the game. Or maybe they're like, it's the Running Man and they're criminals and they get put in the game. But either way, we'll see the build up to them getting put in the game. And I would imagine, because this is the way every Netflix show works at the moment, I would imagine that the end of the episode would be something incredibly violent, probably the first game where we realise just how dangerous and gruesome this is.
Something shocking.
Yeah, totally very shocking. Because you know how, like, that's the thing in Netflix, right? And in kind of like drama in general at the moment, surprisingly extreme violence. It happens in the first episode of Invincible when Omega Man, like, just kills the rest of the superheroes, but does it in, like, a surprisingly violent way. You know, like, he's punching through people's heads and ripping people's spinal cords. And, like, episode 1 was very much that in the end. But surprisingly to me, we only got the build-up from one of those characters. And that's Gi-hoon, who is the character that is he's our protagonist, right, throughout the entire series.
Yeah, I'd say he's the main protagonist. He's kind of like the everyman. We'll talk about him a bit more.
Yeah, and we see him in episode 1, and we see the situation he's in, where he's very short on money, and he's estranged from his daughter and his ex-wife. She's kind of like in a new relationship. He's unemployed. He's stealing from his mother. He's gambling. He's in debt, and like loads of gangsters are threatening to cut bits off him and start the body horror. And that's when he finds himself approached by the guy who tries to get him involved with the game, right?
The handsome stranger.
Was he
Can we call him
handsome?
that?
This is the first you've mentioned of him being handsome. Now, I'm glad. Now, I'm really glad you didn't mention it during the show, because every time he come on, I'd been like, I hate that guy. What a dick. Oh, man.
The knowing, smirking stranger.
Okay, like, also, if we're just going to compliment people on being, like, good looking in Squid Game, then it's going to take a long time, because literally everyone in this show is a model.
Yeah, let's get this out of the way. Like, not even exaggeration.
And that's not unusual for TV, right? No. But, you watch this show and you go, okay, I'm going to do some research on the cast, and it's like, this person was a model for 20 years before they became. It's like, oh, what? And then even the guy that plays Gi-hoon, like, you look at his like movies and TV shows that he's been in before, and that dude is like, everything you see him in, he's got his top off, he's like hench, he's like kissing girls and blowing up helicopters.
I love it. You get like a character who's super buttoned up with glasses. It's like, you can't hide it. You think you're hiding it.
He gets approached by the handsome stranger who basically humiliates him, right?
Yeah, who invites him to a game. At this point, Gi-hoon has had quite a bad day. As you say, he's kind of failed miserably to give his daughter a nice birthday dinner.
And he's not a very likable character at this point either, right?
No.
Because he is stealing from his mum. He is kind of like on this track of just gambling and doesn't seem to have much going on in his life. A lot of that is explained later, and he becomes a lot more kind of sympathetic.
Exactly, but from the beginning, you're like...
but he's not very likable at first. And he's not meant to be either.
No, exactly. He's invited to play a game where you throw these bits.
What is that game called? We didn't know what that game was called in the test footage either, did we? And we didn't look it up. We didn't find out what it was called. But it is a very simple game. It's like a kid's game, like, I guess, Conkers, right? Where you're kind of smashing, like, it's just some folded up paper, and you're trying to flip over the other guy's paper.
Exactly. And basically, this guy comes up and offers Gi-hoon money if he wins.
Which, obviously, Gi-hoon completely takes, because he's just lost all his money in gambling, right?
Yes, and he's been pickpocketed.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So he actually wins in the gambling. Which makes him even less likable somehow.
Exactly.
And then he gets... he's running away from the people who want to take his eyes out, and he bumps into a super hot model who we later find out steals his money.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have it on him anymore. And that means no present for his daughter, no paying his debts to the people who want to take out his eyes. It's bad news all round.
There is a catch. If he loses the game, he's going to owe the guy money.
At first, it's like a single bet.
Yes.
He loses the game, and he's like, I haven't actually got any money to give you. I'm really sorry. I made this bet and kind of assumed I'd win. And handsome stranger, who's so handsome, and like I barely even heard the words he was saying, because I was just like lost in his dreamy eyes, right? And handsome stranger's like, well, that's okay. I'll accept just slapping you in the face as payment.
Yeah.
Which is like a really horrible scene, obviously, because it's the desperation of Ji-hun to win this money, and because he keeps on going, right? And he accepts the slap in the face, and the stranger is like, do you want to go again? And the stranger just keeps on winning, keeps slapping him in the face, and Gi-hun just takes it because he's got no other choice.
Yeah, so he goes with it until eventually he wins a round of the game. And I love this bit because he moves his hand to slap the guy right away. The guy grabs his hand and is like, you know, you can take the money instead.
Exactly. So his first reaction is to kind of get revenge and almost equality, as it were, with this guy who has been causing him physical pain and hurting his body for money. And that's a bit of a foreshadow, isn't it, I guess? Yeah. And again, he's so desperate for money that he doesn't choose the equality of hitting the guy. Yep. He instead chooses to take the money because he needs it so much. Almost like he doesn't really have a choice. But anyway, that's for a different part of the video. Then the guy gives him a card with the PlayStation logo on it, and he's like, yo, there's another game that we're doing with loads more people PS5? And for loads more money. It's in stock.
Oh my god, is that how they announce that
here's
it's
a stock alert?
Someone shows up at your door.
You have to let someone slap you for 20 minutes, like over and over again. Then they tell you where PS5s are in stock. We're doing another game. It's much bigger, loads more money, loads more people, but places are running out fast. So if you want to do it, give me a call. And Gi-hun's like, you're an idiot. I hate you. You've just been slapping me in the face. No way. But obviously then he realizes that, you know, his personal situation is so dire. His mum is in hospital and needs an operation, which they can't afford. He finds out that his strange wife is going to be taking his daughter to America. So and he can't stop them because he's got no money because he can't get custody. Yeah. And his mum's like, if you have money, you get custody and be fine. And basically he decides to take a chance and call this guy and take part in the game. In many ways, this is what I expected from the structure of the first episode.
Right.
Then the kind of limo comes along and picks him up, and there's they kind of take him willingly and they kind of kidnap him because
the whole
kind of
idea
gas
of consent
makes them fall asleep
fuzzy.
like the 60s Batman show, you know, and then they're taken out to this island in the middle of the ocean, and you know, that's when towards the end of the episode we are first introduced to like other people in the game, but only very, very briefly as well. So the thing that did surprise me about the first episode was the fact that we only seemed to be introduced to Gi-hun. And, you know, we did get snippets of Gangster Guy. We did get snippets of North Korean Girl, who, by the way, Gi-hun turned out to be the last person in the game. 456 people in the game. Se-byok, the North Korean girl, is like number 60-something.
Oh, yeah.
Which means that when she stole that money, she had already agreed to be in the game.
Like a while ago.
Yeah, and she was just waiting for the game to start. But of course, still had no money. Still was like on the prowl for money she could steal and stuff like that. But it's an interesting thought.
So we are suddenly at the setting for the game. Everyone's in their iconic green tracksuits.
Oh, and it's so stylized.
Which we tried to order for ourselves, and then we're hilariously scammed out of
so fitting.
official SquidGame.com.
Because we thought it'd be cool for this episode, as well as having a nice framed picture of some soldiers, we thought it'd be nice to kind of dress up in Squid Game tracksuits, you know, bit of fun for the internet, eh? And we ordered them, 2-3 weeks ago?
Yep.
From official SquidGame.com. It was like the most legit website we could find, still not legit at all. To no one's surprise, our tracksuits never arrived and the website's closed down. Like disappeared from the internet.
Yeah.
Do you know what I think? I suspect, you know, maybe this is incredibly optimistic. I suspect they'll arrive in like a year's time.
I don't know. I don't think they will. I think much like Squid Coin, we have just been completely duped.
Scammed. They meet each other. We have a very brief interaction between Gi-hun and the old man, contestant number 1, who we find out who is dying, and you know, but not really the kind of introduction to characters that we'd be used to in this kind of setup, which is weird because you get more setup with characters than that in a movie, and this is a Netflix show, so the whole point is you've got more time for character setup, and I for one was very surprised that we didn't get it. So we got a bit of Gangster Guy, we got a bit of Annoying Woman, we got a bit of Se-byok, and you know, like other people around the place as well, and straight away we're into the first game. They give the rules, you know, anyone who doesn't complete the game will be eliminated, anyone who refuses to take part will be eliminated, and a third rule as well, which we'll get to in a second. But the game starts, and yeah, they go through that crazy staircase,
which is a kind of call out to MC Escher, right? It kind of, the stairways go into different holes and then they kind of emerge from
like
others.
Infinity sort of thing.
Exactly.
And you don't know where you're going or where
almost
you're going to end up.
There's no escape.
Yeah. And they are placed in this almost like a TV set, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very much kind of like imposed on the landscape and enclosed in the landscape as well. And they play a game of what we in this country would call grandmother's footsteps.
I would call it red light, green light.
That's what they call it as well. Unsurprisingly, turns out to be incredibly deadly. There's a huge robot girl who's playing the game, and when she turns around, her eyes go weird, and they, like Terminator style, pick people out who are moving, and then the soldiers, who are the people that ostensibly run the game, and as far as we know at this stage, the only audience of the game as well, they snipe a rifle off the person who they first spot moving. And bullet goes right through their head. They drop down dead, blood everywhere, and that obviously causes a huge stampede of people in the game who are like, "Whoa, no, what? Ah!" And they run to the exit, and they obviously die because they're moving, and it's like a bloodbath.
So there's our kind of shocking, like, visual,
and that's
violence.
Exactly what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the show will be the rest of the game, right?
Yeah.
And we'll get to know characters a bit more throughout
It's
that.
almost like you know how TV works.
We do realise that he's got like an old childhood friend in the game with him as well, Song-woo, who like gives him tips and helps him out and appears to be like quite friendly. Mm-hmm. We meet Ali as well in that episode, who's the Pakistani immigrant, and that's where that kind of like iconic. There's so much visually that's iconic about this show. You know, from like the set design and the costume design. There are two images for me that come out of that first episode, which you see everywhere, memed and stuff, and which really kind of like implant themselves on your brain. And they're both from the Grandmother's Footsteps game at the end. And the first one is the old man just loving it. Like contestant number one, like... Yes. He does proper jazz hands like every time he stops. He runs forward and he goes... and you're like, wow, dude, that guy dying of cancer, he loves this game.
See, that's memeable. I can just see people like in the edit being like, there's the memeable
There's
moment.
the meme.
There's the
And obviously like the other really iconic image is the bit where Gi-hoon like falls over and Ali like catches him midair, and they're both standing there in profile, like this incredible like image, like so strong, which is incredibly meaningful as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Episode 1 finishes kind of where I expect it to finish. I mean, it's pretty much gone the way I expected it to. You know, the game is set up now. It was super violent, although not overly bloody, I don't think. Like, the violence is there in the fact that just, like, loads of people die. Half the people in the game die. 200 people die in that game. And that's a lot of people, right? So there's bodies piled up everywhere. There is blood in the sawdust and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say it's excessive in that sense. It's like, it's not, the gore isn't shocking. The fact that loads of people die is.
Exactly. And it's the shock factor. And it's not gratuitous. It's not like
there's no one with like their brain hanging out and stuff like that. No one gets decapitated. No one's like ripped in half. There's no like bone. There's no gristle.
There are a lot of people just lying in pools of blood, which you might expect.
So I was like, okay, I understand where this is going now. You know, we'll get to know these other characters a lot more as the show goes on, and we will be sad when they die. And then I was incredibly surprised by episode 2, which basically reversed the entire thing and did a lot of what I expected episode 1 to do. Because at the beginning of episode 2, they vote to leave the game and to cancel the game. And again, we're going to talk about like the meaning behind all of this stuff a little bit later on. But they vote to cancel the game. Song-woo, who is very much like portrayed as the pragmatic, more kind of smart, intelligent one, I guess.
Yeah.
He remembers the third rule, which is like, you said that if we vote to end the game, we can end the game with the majority. And that's where they show how much money is at stake.
Exactly.
And it is a lot.
Piggy bank comes down and you realize that, your lives are at stake here, but also it's a lot of cash.
It's something like $48 million, something like that, which is like obviously life-changing. And that... Obviously, everyone is terrified and would walk out the door instantly before they see that, and that enacts a change in a lot of people.
And of course, the thing is that if everyone votes to leave, no one gets the money.
They do it in reverse order of their numbers. Gi-hoon was the last to join the game, and he instantly votes to leave. And there's a lot of interesting choices about who votes to leave and who doesn't. But eventually they do vote to finish the game, and they're dropped off back at home. And that is when we get what I was expecting from episode 1, which is the actual introduction to the other characters characters as
Right,
well.
because then they are back on their home turf. They've gone back to their life as they know it, right? They've been taken out of it really dramatically. And now you see what's actually going on with them.
They are all in debt. They're all in trouble in some way. We're going to talk about each, like the characters in a different section, but they all have a real reason for not wanting to be in the world and to want to win this money. And eventually, they all decide throughout the course of the episode to actually come back into the game. And that's the whole second episode. And do you know what it reminded me of?
What?
It actually reminded me of Lost. In that, like, Lost starts with the disaster. And then over the course of the first season, we meet the characters in flashback and we see their lives in flashback. Squid Game kind of did that, but not in flashback. It just It just ended the game and put them all back in their lives again. And so we see them in their normal lives after we've already seen them in the horror of the game.
Exactly. And it adds to the tragedy, which is that that they're going to go back to the game because their lives are really, really dismal and are in a really bad place.
A tragedy has to be avoidable and it has to be like self-inflicted in some way. Now there's a debate about how avoidable and self-inflicted it actually is, of course, but they choose to go back into this deadly game where they literally just saw 200 people shot in front of their eyes. And they have families, they have lives, which but they choose to go back into this deadly situation. The other thing that happens in episode 2 is that because Gi-hun, despite the fact that we've seen him gambling and stealing and being a terrible father up to this point, he's the one that it goes straight to the police when he's let out of the game. He goes to the police and he's like, whoa, police, do you understand what's going on here? And obviously no one believes him. But this is where we're also introduced to the policeman character, Jun-ho, who becomes another one of our protagonists and serves a very different purpose in the story and in the structure of the series as well. But that episode ends with all of the characters that we've met before getting back into their limo, getting gassed again, getting driven back onto the ferry, back into the island to start this game again. And there's this sense of inevitability and this sense of kind of crushing danger. And now they know exactly what the game is.
Exactly.
And they're stepping willfully into it. And it's something, no one's happy about it. We know that most of them are going to die, right? And that's how it goes. Except it also gives us as the audience a slight sliver of hope as well, because Jun-ho goes all gun-ho and infiltrates because he's looking for his brother who's gone missing and he thinks he's part of the game. He infiltrates one of the limousines. Doesn't he grab underneath it to get onto the ferry or something like that?
He does some pretty badass moves.
The episode ends with him following the limousines anyway.
Right, so you do have this tiny hope that maybe he might be the key.
And he might essentially rescue them essentially, and maybe that's the way that some of our favourite characters who are getting introduced now will survive.
So
right?
it's not entirely without hope.
So there is a little bit of hope, but generally there's a sense at the end of the second episode of this kind of crushing inevitability about everything. There's been no Squid Game in this episode at all. You haven't seen the games in action, so there's been none of that kind of torture porn, which is kind of what this genre of thing is about. It's just been this awesome episode of delayed character development. When you see them in their normal life, they're not unsuspecting victims. They already know what the game is all about. And that context of seeing them decide to go back is incredibly powerful. Yeah. And that's when I realized at the end of episode 2 how good this show was. Beyond it just being cool and colorful and exciting and scary. And, that's when I was like, okay, we're going to binge this and I'm going to really, really like it. And I was mostly right. On the face of it, Squid Game is, a character-driven survival horror game in the mold of Battle Royale, Running Man, Hunger Games, a bit of Saw in there as well. Yeah. Also has the same twist as Saw.
Shh, we're not there yet.
It's perfectly acceptable and reasonable to enjoy Squid Game on that level. There's nothing wrong with just enjoying it as a character-driven survival horror game, and
totally.
That's awesome. It does that very well, but there is more to it than that, isn't there? What is Squid Game actually about, Evitel?
Squid Game is ultimately the story of a bunch of people who are really quite oppressed by an economic and social system that is destroying their lives, which removes really any kind of real consent from even going into the game and renders them completely helpless, and most people die, and that's the end, really.
It sounds like you're saying it's about capitalism.
If I had to choose a word for it, then maybe yes.
Do you know who you sound like when you say that?
Who?
The guy who made Squid Game.
Oh!
But before we get there, let us go to section 2.
Section 2, the characters.
It's really funny, actually, because all the characters are kind of stock characters in a way. In a disaster movie and in a disaster show, you expect the characters to represent like different sections of society. All right? And that's kind of what the contestants are in Squid Game, but they're more like different facets of one section of society.
Yes.
Because like the whole point about pretty much everyone who is taking part in the Squid Game is they're in debt. And there's a doctor in there. Yeah. There is someone who worked in finance as well, although they were from a very working class background originally. And maybe that's quite important as well. Essentially, the characters as we see them, they represent different facets of working class.
Right.
So, but they're also characters in their own right, okay? And they are kind of archetypes in their own right as well. So, Gi-hun, our main protagonist.
Yeah, so he's a bit washed up. We know he has a gambling problem. We know he's not the best dad.
He's so beautiful, though.
He's I can't help it.
I'm still thinking of the topless, like, helicopter pics, though. Except at the very end of the show where he dyes his hair red and he looks like Dot Cotton from EastEnders.
Yeah, that's
but
what
apart
I'm talking
from
about
red, not his colour. Very meaningful, though. But so you know, when we're first introduced into him, it's very easy to see him as being a very unlikable character, a character who kind of has brought a lot of his own situation on himself, and a terrible father, right, as well. Like, he literally spends the money that his mum gives him for his own daughter's birthday present, gambles it away.
Should have been spent on fried chicken.
Yeah, and that's all she wanted. That's all she wanted was fried chicken. And man, I know that feeling. My goodness, if I discovered that you gambled away my birthday fried chicken money.
Hey, chicken tonight?
Yeah, please. I love capitalism. In the end, actually has to win her birthday present in a game, a children's game.
A claw game.
Like at the fairground, a children's game. When did you start liking Gi-hun?
He has little moments right off the bat, maybe not right off the bat, but maybe from episode 2 when he starts interacting with other characters, with the old man, with some of the others, where he seems almost... He's quite sympathetic and kind. He has little moments of kindness and almost like he's almost a bit naive.
I think that's exactly the word I'm thinking of as well.
Or like he's almost naive and earnest. And I think he's a really good lens to kind of look at the game through and to be kind of our intro character.
Yeah, because like literally every time someone dies in the game, he's shocked.
Yeah.
He's like, everyone else kind of hardens to it quite quickly. But every time someone dies, Gi-hun is like, oh my God, they killed that person.
Yeah. And you realize that he is ultimately like kind, and that comes out throughout the games themselves. And a little bit green, because we have to kind of, through him, we learn lessons constantly, and we learn about how terrible the game is, and we learn about other people and how terrible other people can be as well. So I think he's almost like the perfect vehicle for telling the story of the game, because we're learning with him, right?
And as you find out more about his past, you realise that there's an element of kind of trauma in his past as well. He worked in a car factory, and he saw a worker die in a strike that they were doing for better conditions. Did you see him beaten to death, like quite violently?
Yeah, and this is based on an actual strike that had happened in real life.
He's got this major aversion to violence, but also kind of this feeling of helplessness, right? He had a proper job. He had his kind of future mapped out, took up their democratic right to strike. Someone got killed because of it, and he's kind of lost. He's like disillusioned and lost, and that kind of comes out in very self-destructive ways. But there is like that naivety, that kind of, you know, he chats to everyone and tries to become friends with everyone. You know, his first interaction with anyone in the game is where he's talking to contestant number 1, the old man. And like, he's an old man, so he asks him questions about his life, and that's why we realise that the guy's dying of cancer. And because Gi-hun asked him, because he was interested, because he's got like this natural respect for an elder sort of thing. When he sees Sang-woo, his childhood friend,
he's like, hey
Sang-woo, and he asks him about his life and how he's doing and why he's here. And you know, in British terms, you might call it salt of the earth decency. Like, he's a decent person, you know. He lost his job for life, you know, and lost his family because of that. He tried to start his own business twice, which both failed. And we don't know if that's because he's a terrible businessman or if there's anything else involved. We just don't know. So we know that he we know that he hasn't always been this way, and that before he was doing everything that was expected of him, right? And he was working in a job, and then he started a business, and like you're supposed to do. And for some reason, it just hasn't worked out for him. And now he's got people running after him trying to take his eyes, you know?
Sungwoo.
Okay, so Sungwoo is his friend from, they grew up in the same part of Seoul. We see Gi-hun interacting with Sungwoo's mum, who has a fish store in the market, and she's very kind to Gi-hun and gives him like very cheap and free fish and things like that. And Sungwoo is like the prodigy, right? He escaped the ghetto, and he became successful, and he became, like rich and powerful, and he's in debt because he was caught embezzling money.
Basically, and investing in shady funds, all this financial stuff. But he is kind of the community from which he came from has basically looked up to him and see him as this like wunderkind.
Sungwoo is certainly not presented as what you would describe as the baddie. Like there's a very obvious baddie in the group of people, and that's the gangster dude. But I think by the end of the show, everyone would agree Sungwoo is the baddie of the game people, right?
Yeah. Again, he's done everything right. He's been successful. And then, he's kind of crashed and he's in debt and things are very bad and the police are coming for him. The elements of his character that come through in the games and in his interactions with character, kind of as we said in the first game, like he is calculating. He's very strategic.
And I guess showing characteristics that you would have to go from being the same as everyone else in the ghetto to change social groups and class divides, right? Which is what he does. And so those characteristics are a certain calculating ruthlessness.
He's an achiever.
He's certainly ruthless, right? And he puts himself above anyone else. And so like when we first see him, he's Gi-hun's friend, right? And he can be seen to maybe be saving Gi-hun in that first game as well. The next time we see him is when he is the guy who remembers the third rule of the game and gets everyone out of the game and saves all of their lives. Yeah. Although tellingly, he actually votes to stay in the game once he sees how much money is on the go. And that's what I love about that voting bit was I feel like nearly every character voted for something that I didn't expect them to vote for. Like Gi-hun obviously just is like, get me out of here, naive child who's still surprised people are dying. And you'd expect Sungwoo to do the same because he's the one that actually found the loophole and remembered the loophole and got the vote to happen in the first place. And he's just like, no, keep me in. And we know he must be in debt, and we see how bad things are later on. But even then, we see him being incredibly kind to Ali and give Ali the last dollars from his wallet so he can get home. And that's a genuine kindness that he's showing to Ali at that point.
Yeah, so when faced
nothing calculating about that.
Exactly. So when faced with other people and their struggles and their issues.
And out of the context of the game.
And out of the context of the game, exactly. He's a person and he has moments of kindness too. But you can see that this is going to be potentially a struggle for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And his kind of ruthless side becomes more and more apparent the further and further they get into the game. When obviously it becomes more important, and obviously that kind of sense of survival becomes more and more desperate. It all culminates in the marble episode that we're going to have a special section for because it's probably the highlight of the entire show from an action point of view and a suspense point of view and a writing point of view and a character point of view as well. I think it's the peak of the show. Sungwoo certainly shows a lot of his colours there as well.
Third in our, should I say like our triad of protagonists?
Yeah, okay.
Is Se-byuk from North Korea. Also a model.
She's a model as well. It's so weird. The main three characters are models. She is from North Korea. She's escaped with her brother. Her dad is dead. Her mum's gone missing along the way. And, she has literally nothing. They've come to South Korea to escape communism and to find a better life. And so far, just not really working out. Her brother is in care. She keeps promising that they'll get themselves together and she will look after him and they'll get a house and go somewhere
And she's
special.
trying to get the money to get her mother into South Korea.
And she's incredibly hard, kind of on her surface, quite emotionless, very untrusting, as you'd imagine. And like everyone does kind of look down on her as a North Korean immigrant as well. Of the triad, she's the least developed character, I'd say. Not to say that she's not sympathetic by the end.
Yeah, I would say she's kind of a flat character in that she's obviously a complex person, but her motivations and her drives are pretty clear, and the way she responds to things is going to be pretty predictable. I mean, she was picking pockets and having dalliances with gang members.
And another one who votes to stay in the game.
Right.
And in fact, when she comes back to the game, she covers her mouth, doesn't get gassed by the by the limousine. She's smart, man. She's streetwise and manages to hide a knife on her person, which she uses later on to kind of save her own life. And then you've got like your kind of secondary ring of game players, and this is where you've got people like Ali, who is a Pakistani immigrant who works in a factory, but had an accident in the factory which left him mutilated. And hasn't been paid for 6 months. He votes to leave the game as well, though, doesn't he?
He does. Ali's character is just a fundamentally, I would say, a good person in character. Also a bit naive.
Yeah,
but his naivety is quite different.
So
right?
if we're talking about archetypes, there's a lot to be said which is very good about the way Ali is portrayed, but there is also a certain element of the loyal ethnic.
So this is a trope, right?
Yeah.
So I would say it touches on that a little bit, but he's representative of kind of an actual larger class in South Korea,
exactly.
which is migrant workers who are being exploited.
And like that act of selflessness in the first episode where he does catch Gi-hun is kind of, emblematic of that. Yeah, exactly. And he never really changes from that either. In fact, the secondary ring of characters don't really develop much at all. They're kind of just there to exist, because then you've got the gangster guy as well.
Exactly.
Deok-soo, your mafia dude, who, again, you would expect, because he displays all of the characteristics that you would expect to favor you in the game, right? So he's strong and he is ruthless and he's
mean.
Dangerous and he doesn't give no shit, man.
Nope.
And he will just kill you. And it's that's what he does outside. That's what he'll do in here. So when he votes against the game and when he votes to leave in episode 2, again, that was a surprise, right? And when he does get outside again, you see that he is a dangerous criminal. Obviously, he's no stranger to violence and murder, but he has dicked up. And again, he's cheated his kind of bosses, and he's gone from this position of protection and power to being the hunted, as it were, like the person that he meets on the outside who he considers to be his friend or confidant, like betrays him and results in they're gonna murder him, they're gonna steal his organs
and harvest his organs.
Those organs, he's got some good organs as well, man. He might have made a mistake in cheating his bosses, but you kind of feel like when you live that kind of criminal life, it's always just a matter of time before this kind of stuff comes round anyway, right? So when he finds himself back in the game, he uses those kind of characteristics and qualities to kind of like he literally puts a gang together, right? And sort of like the baddie gang. And he's just horrible to everyone, which is, serves him very, very well, essentially, throughout the game. And then there's the character that of the game players, like the outer circle of game players. There's the character that, even now, despite how much we've talked about it in our own time and stuff, I still don't really understand. And that's the other woman.
So that's Han Min-yo, who is, on the face of it, quite over the top. She's clearly a con woman.
And her actor gives it some as well. Like, she does not hold back. The acting in Squid Game, for someone who's not used to kind of, Eastern drama, essentially, it's the same when you watch Japanese movies for the first time and stuff like that. The acting style can appear incredibly over the top, almost kind of like a cartoon sort of level. And she is she's everything. She's every cartoon.
But I felt like she was kind of the least developed character, but also like the weakest archetype, if we're going to talk about this
sure.
as well.
I still don't really know what she represents.
I guess don't really know.
She's like this just whirlwind of, I've had to just do anything to survive, right?
Yes.
So, I shout at people, I'm nice to people, I drag people in, I push people away, I'm just like a ball of whatever I need to be in any moment.
Yeah, just like chaos energy.
But also she's a terrible judge of situations as well, because in nearly every situation she does the wrong thing.
Exactly.
Like on a couple of occasions she manages to make some alliances and things like that, but shits on them constantly,
and then destroys them.
The part where they're trying to find partners for the marble game. She is desperately trying to find a partner and uses all what she sees as her wiles and her chaos energy to do that. But by that point, everyone sees through her completely, and everything she says and does just pushes people further away.
I think there's actually something to that in the way that whenever she talks to someone, she's like, I can be whatever you want. I can do whatever you want. And I think that is her character.
Yeah.
She has she isn't any one thing.
And she's had to do that, right, to survive.
Exactly,
because,
exactly.
you know, I mean, she's never had a chance, in a way, you could say, to become her own person.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's always had to be what was required of her in any situation.
Yeah.
So she's never actually, she probably doesn't even know who she is.
No.
All she's driven by is like this insatiable kind of will to survive,
Mm-hmm.
which is all she's ever known, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we got there.
I think we sussed it.
We worked out who she is. Then, of course, we have like contestant number 1.
The old man.
The old man, who is very important in many ways, and we're not going to talk about him very much here. In many ways, he's kind of there to show Gi-hun's kindness. He's there almost as a way for Gi-hun to show us what a nice guy he is and what a good character he is. He apparently appears to have episodes where he doesn't know what's going on. We know he's dying of cancer. And we know that he was actually quite looking forward to the game.
Yeah.
You know, he was quite involved in it. And, you know, during Grandmother's Footsteps, he was all like...
loving it.
Which is why it's surprising that he votes to leave. And that was really interesting. And before anything else about his character became apparent, that was another thing about episode 2 that really surprised me, was because it came down to a 50-50 choice, you know, and his was the deciding vote, being the last person to vote. And it was that thing of, oh, well, he's going to vote to stay in because we know he's really enjoying it.
He's dying.
And that's the tragedy of episode 2, right, was that they had the chance to vote out of the game, but they didn't. Which is why it's like genuinely surprising when he votes to leave. And at the time, I saw that as an act of extreme generosity on his part, actually, because we knew that he wanted the game to happen, but he kind of thought, no, you know, people deserve the right to survive if they've chosen this. And knowing what I know about his character at the end of the show, I still consider it an act of generosity, actually.
It is. Or is it just an act of foresight and knowing a bit about how people work and what people
there's
do?
probably an element of that as well. But I feel like, I don't know, maybe, I mean, we know that he does take a shine to Gi-hun, and I feel like that shine has already established itself there. Like, it becomes stronger, that link between them as the game goes on. But I think it has been established at that point. And maybe the fact that Gi-hun voted to leave, it was like an act of kindness from contestant number 1 to give Gi-hun what he wanted. It's like Gi-hun wants to survive, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'll give him that.
He was nice to me.
Yeah.
Even though, you know.
Yeah.
And he goes back into the game anyway. So, yeah. But we'll talk more about him later on. Outside of the circle of game players, there's also Junho, the policeman. And he serves a really interesting role. If Gi-hun is our kind of lens into the game and our viewpoint of the game from the inside, then he allows us to see behind the scenes, which we would never get to see if we were just watching the players of the game.
Exactly. So he infiltrates the game as one of these guys.
Well, this is him in this picture, in fact.
Ah, how would you know?
Because I've seen the scene.
Right. So he infiltrates these guys who are the soldiers, who are kind of ostensibly managing the game, shooting people when they need shooting and hurting everyone around as they need to be. And so with that, we get this look into what's going on with them, which we wouldn't see otherwise.
Yeah, and so we get to see like the underground organ harvesting ring and just like the kind of day-to-day of how the soldiers live. And then, of course, the only other character that we really get to see, who I'd describe as a main character, is the host or the front man, depending on what internet site you read.
The pixelated face man.
What, is he pixelated? I think he looks like Crichton from Red Dwarf. He's just got like a kind of a shiny condom face, right? Like a novelty condom. He's like Crichton from Red Dwarf cosplaying as Dr. Doom. And he's clearly the most senior of the soldiers. He's clearly in charge, ostensibly, of the day-to-day. He's got his own office, which is all glittery. Like, he loves disco. And, you know, he's the one that gives the orders. He orders the soldiers to go in and stop the riot when that happens and what have you. So he's obviously in charge. He turns out to be the missing brother of Junho, rather predictably, and also an ex-winner of the game as well. But interestingly, he's also played by the most famous actor in the show. And do you know what? I knew that, even though I don't know who the actor is, but I knew as soon as he took his mask off, the way that the camera was on him when he took the mask off, I was like, He's the most famous actor in this show. If I was South Korean, I would know exactly who that is.
Even in a sea of hot people.
I could just tell. I guess it's like if Matt Damon was behind the mask, right? And it was a TV show you were watching, and then suddenly Matt Damon was in it. Because this guy's a movie star.
Yeah.
In fact, he's such a movie star. He's actually referenced, like, in Squid Game, in the marbles game, when Se-byok is talking with the South Korean girl and they're forming their hot emo girl kind of thing. She says, don't you know that line Lee Byung-hun, who is the actor, says in that movie about mojitos and the Maldives? And that's a movie called, I think, Inside Men, which is really famous, that he was in, right? So, like, the actual actor who plays the front man is referenced kind of
meta.
in universe. It's so meta. So meta. Which is a little inside joke. An inside joke about the movie Inside Men. And actually, I want to talk about the host and the brother in our next section. Section 3, a massive plot hole with the host.
Uh-oh.
There is a plot hole in this thing. Now, I've read lots of kind of articles online about plot holes in Squid Game.
With immense glee.
Yeah, because most of the plot holes in Squid Game articles should really be called "We Don't Understand Squid Game." And
This is
trust
the
me,
plot of Squid Game.
We're going to get to that as well. But I think there is a genuine plot hole
Right.
in this show,
Okay.
which annoyed me a little bit, involving the front man and his brother Junho. Okay, so it turns out that, and see if you agree with me here.
Okay.
Right? It turns out, Junho is looking for his brother. His brother has gone missing, which suggests that his brother has only gone missing like quite recently. A year at most,
Right.
but probably not even that. And he goes to his brother's last known address, which is like just some kind of room in some bullshit kind of building, and the landlady is there and gives him access to the room, right? And because she's like, oh, he hasn't paid his rent and for the last month, and you're gonna have to pay it, and and he's like, yeah. So we know that he wasn't missing a month ago and that he was paying his rent. The policeman goes in and he finds the Squid Game card in his brother's room in a box, which is what alerts him to the fact that maybe he needs to go and infiltrate the Squid Game to find his brother. We later find out that his brother is a past Squid Game winner from years ago,
Way
like
back.
a decade ago, right? And since then, he won the Squid Game, right? So he won $48 million. And, maybe he spent it, maybe he invested incredibly wisely, who knows? But either way, he ended up back in the Squid Game, working for the Squid Game, and eventually, if not immediately, became the front man and the most important employee
Right.
of the Squid Game. A man with like significant power and sway, and he literally commands all of the other soldiers. They do what he says. He's the boss, right? And it's unlikely that this Squid Game that we see is the first Squid Game that the front man has worked on, right?
He seems to have experience.
He's clearly worked on lots of Squid Games before. So how come this is the only time that his brother has noticed that he's gone missing? And why did he not pay his rent on his room? Because he knew he'd be coming back to it after the Squid
Why
Game.
did he have a Squid Game card?
And he's got
sent to
loads,
his-
exactly. And he's got loads of money. He's got $48 million. So okay, let's say that he lost all that, and that's why he's working for the Squid Game. I find it unlikely, but okay. Even if his plan, when the new Squid Game starts, is to leave his room without paying, why would he leave his possessions there and a card about Squid Game, which he knows is very secret because he works on it and he's the host?
Okay, so I have a theory.
Okay.
Right, so it can't be that he actually wants his brother to find it in order to expose the Squid Game.
No, I don't think so.
Because
When that is a possibility, he just shoots his brother.
Shoots him in the face and kills him, and he falls off a cliff.
I bet he's alive though.
Oh,
I bet he's I bet in the writing he's dead.
Yeah.
But I bet in season 2 he's suddenly not.
Oh no!
You know it. Never see the squished
You
body.
never see him die. So maybe it's possible that he does want his brother to find the card. He does want his brother to come, but he wants to get his brother in on it. He wants to show his brother clearly, if you're the host of the Squid Game, you have to potentially, if you've been doing it long enough, you might believe in this sort of thing.
I know, man.
And
He
you might think, hey.
he seems pretty surprised when he realizes it's his brother. Like, he copes with it incredibly quickly, and he adapts to that very quickly.
He does.
He doesn't dwell on it, but I think it is a surprise when it turns out to be his brother.
Sure.
And like, because there are situations where there's clearly someone going a bit rogue in the soldiers.
Right.
There's clearly an infiltrator, and if he had purposely left the card hoping that his brother would come,
He would have thought that was his
He would
brother.
have been like, oh, my brother has
causing the
come.
trouble.
Excellent. And he might even have kept tab using this extensive network of kind of like inside agents that they have in the real world. He might have even kept tabs on his brother to know where his brother was.
Okay, you know what, Tally? I'm just reaching for straws right now.
I just think it's a massive. I just don't see.
It doesn't make sense.
I just don't see why he would have left his room unpaid for with all his stuff in and a clue to the secret illegal game that no one's allowed to know about.
Okay, you're right.
It just doesn't make any sense to me.
You're right.
Maybe if it was his first rodeo, but we know it's not. We know he's been working for it for ages. So that's a big plot hole. I don't like it. Squid Game is rubbish. Section 4. Understanding Squid Game.
Oh no, do we have to do this section?
I'm really sorry that we have to do this section. Here's the thing, I don't want to do this section, okay? It's not, for me, it's so obvious what Squid Game is about. The writer and director of Squid Game agrees with me, okay? I'm objectively correct about what Squid Game is about.
Let's get this on the table, though. All art is open to interpretation, right?
Exactly.
You can read the text however you choose, and many readings are valid. And
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
However,
it is about something. It does have a wider message, and it's quite obviously about capitalism for sure. I think it's kind of more about class and the class system, and of course, that's always going to be intrinsically intertwined with whatever economic system that you're practicing.
Totally.
And that happens to be capitalism in this case. You write about what you know. A lot of drama from South Korea has been about the same thing recently. Obviously, Parasite is a really good example of that. Snowpiercer is another incredibly in your face. And that's the thing. The analogies and the message of these things like Snowpiercer and Parasite and Squid Game, it's not subtle. It's about as subtle as the annoying woman's acting.
it's about as subtle as playing a game where people's lives are worth a certain amount of money and people have to make the choice.
So South Korea obviously is, to all intents and purposes, an island, right? It's a very small island. It's not landlocked to any other country apart from North Korea, which is essentially, a dead, no one can go to North Korea, right? So it's essentially an island to all intents and purposes. And it has had capitalism happen there very quickly over a very short period of time. A lot of people have become very rich and a lot of people have become very poor and very exploited. In fact, in the first week that Squid Game was out on Netflix, there were huge trade union marches happening all across South Korea. This is a big present issue that people are talking about, which actually made the kind of when Gi-hun starts talking about seeing his friend killed in a trade union march, and that's one of the reasons why he's so messed up, it kind of brought it home a little bit more because and the writer and director has very explicitly said this is about capitalism, right? And what it makes you do and the kind of roles that it forces you into and things like that.
Exactly. The roles we play, each of the characters, we've been talking about archetypes a little bit, each of them kind of describes a different kind of way a person survives under capitalism or interacts with it, how they're affected by it, how they affect other people. These guys also represent some stuff.
Once you know this about capitalism, you can read so much more into the show, and you don't have to do this, but it's what the writer intended, and it is kind of interesting to do it, right? So the idea that everyone is there because they're in debt and that's their fault. The amount of people that it's actually shown to be their fault is incredibly slim. And in most cases, the debt that they're in and the situation that the people in the game are in is of no fault of their own at all. So Ali has no choice in the matter. He hasn't been paid for 6 months. His boss is literally exploiting him in the factory where he works, okay? I mean, it's quite a clear metaphor, right? That image of Ali holding Gi-hun in the first game could easily be interpreted as immigrant labor propping up and holding up the economy for everyone else in that country and how much they rely on that, I know that's something that people read into it. The North Korean girl, she came to South Korea to try and find a better life. She's met nothing but kind of discrimination and lack of chances, and the streets are not lined with gold, but it's not her fault. She has no money, right? She's a political refugee. Her emo girlfriend in the marbles game, she's not even in debt. She just has nothing. She went to jail for killing her abusive father, and the second she stepped out of jail was given a card for Squid Game. She had nothing else, so she was like, what else can I do?
You've got Gi-hun, who is traumatized after taking part in those strikes, and who is unable to hold down a job properly because he exercised his democratic right to strike and has been punished by it.
Yeah, and so like at first he is portrayed quite unsympathetically, but then the more you learn about him, the more you realise, hey, maybe this isn't his fault after all. Song-woo is one of the ones where you could maybe say that he played a part in his own downfall.
You could, but also Song-woo comes from, as we see, like a working class background. He's worked his way up. He's done everything right. He's achieved. And then things have come crashing down around him.
So I think that's really interesting. I completely agree, by the way. So the important thing about Song-woo is that he started off in the ghetto and he had to have certain characteristics to become more than that and escape that. And those characteristics, as we see, are like a kind of a cunning ruthlessness and a self-centeredness, which is what brings him down. So the very kind of like characteristics that he had to show to escape his situation were his own downfall. Because of course he had no, like, those are the only characteristics you can have to escape that situation. By even having the qualities that you need to escape the ghetto, he's doomed to kind of like fall back into the ghetto,
Exactly.
right?
And he works in finance, which everyone sees as this kind of saving grace and like the ultimate achievement. You know, he's working with the money.
Yeah.
He's handling the money. But of course, things go wrong for him as well.
We've already talked about Han Mi-nyo. Did I say that right? Yeah. The annoying woman, and how, you know, she kind of has been forced to become just whatever she's supposed to be, and lacking a kind of a self almost because of it. And I guess you could make an argument that your gangster guy is kind of a bit more, you know, the damage is a bit more self-inflicted. But then if you're brought up in a world of crime, that's what you do to survive. And like, if he's a crime boss, it's because it's better than being a crime underling, right? And your chances of survival are maybe a little bit higher.
Exactly. And he exploits people and hurts people, but he himself has also probably been exploited, right?
He exploits people and hurts people, but he doesn't exploit or hurt people nearly as much as the people who run the game.
Exactly.
Right? It's a much smaller scale, and it's for a reason. He exploits and hurts people to survive, whereas all the exploitation and hurt happening in the Squid Game kind of is for no reason at all.
Yeah.
So that's like just the character archetypes and what they represent there. They represent different parts of the working class, like we say. The soldiers, what do you think they represent in this critique of capitalism?
Right, so if we have a structure here, which looks a bit like a pyramid, you've got
the Squid Game looks like a pyramid.
Or perhaps a squid with a box.
Wait, the Squid Game is a square with a pyramid on top? As in, like, there's a huge mass of underclass and then a very small and narrowing pyramid on top?
Like a hierarchy on top of everyone?
Wow, my mind. Maybe this is about capitalism. I doubted you, but
you're onto
yeah.
something. On the next rung up, I guess, you've got the soldiers. You've got these guys who are, they're running the game, right? They're managing the game. They're managing the players.
But they don't own the game.
They don't own the game, and of course,
and they're employees of the game.
They're employees,
and they're treated pretty badly as well, Evitel. I think this analogy of capitalism is falling down right now. What?
It's almost like the middle class has its own hierarchy.
Wait, are you saying that a common critique of capitalism is that the middle class are implicit in the damage that the ruling class does to the working class just for their own protection? And even though they're not treated very well either, they are spared some of the main danger of the actual game of capitalism?
Huh. It's almost like they're the custodians to some degree, doing a lot of the dirty work, right?
They murder and clean up and enact violence on the working class. The bad exploitation, the actual bodily harm that they cause on the people that play the game isn't even for their own benefit.
No.
You know, they do it for a living, you know, and it doesn't look like it's a particularly good living. And, you know, they are not profiting off it in the way that the person that runs the game is. Exactly. But the trade-off is that they don't have to take part in the game where you get shot in the face if you lose.
You'll just get shot in the face if you break the rules.
Yeah, very occasionally you might get shot in the face, but you're largely spared. You're largely spared from that kind of like threat.
Yeah.
You know, by being complicit and taking part in the game or system.
And then, of course, even within this group of soldiers, you've got illicit activities like like organ harvesting, which is funny to see like how they've found a way to kind of gain a little bit of extra. Like,
yeah, but if you're caught breaking those rules, then you got to play you got to live by the rules that have been set from above. Otherwise, and like just in case you doubted the metaphor of the game representing capitalism, then obviously when it turns out there is an audience for the game, because the audience of Squid Game is kind of hidden throughout. It's not. It's
Who's
not
at the top town.
Well, so it's not like Hunger Games where it's like this big open thing that everyone watches and kind of gets behind their favorite champions. It's not like The Running Man where everyone watches because they feel like they are taking glee and enjoyment out of criminals getting what they deserve, sort of thing. It's not like Battle Royale where the adults and the rest of the world again think that the kids deserve this, and it's kind of a culling. The audience is a lot more passive in Squid Game, and in most cases isn't even there. We don't know who the audience is until a bit later on when we see the VIPs, who are the people that are consuming the game for their own enjoyment, who are coded as business leaders, right?
Yeah, mostly American, but kind of like global business leaders. A lot of guys in suits. Coming off a fancy plane and being quite decadent. I took some issue with the way these characters were portrayed, in that they were like the bad gays.
Oh yeah, like of their decadence and them not caring about other people. It was very much a case of and of course he's gay, because what more disgusting decadence can you think of, right?
Shocking.
Many of them are explicitly American, the VIPs, and the game is being put on for their benefit. They are consuming the game as in they are paying for the game to happen, and actually the true runner and designer of the game is actually explicitly profiting from these people. Like the VIPs haven't seen the game before, it seems, because I'd imagine like the game doesn't change all that much.
No.
There's only so many kids games you can have, right? So it might change a little bit from time to time as new technology is invented. This game's been going for like decades, but the sense was that none of these VIPs had seen the game before, which makes me think there's a whole like conveyor belt of VIPs who are different kind of each time the game happens. Except for the actual owner of the game, which makes me think that he is selling it. He is profiting from it. He is literally profiting from the death and bodies and violence against his own people, his own countrymen, literally selling them on a global market to kind of like the moneyed elite from foreign lands, and that's very explicit.
Yeah, and it's presumably for like inconceivable amounts of money, right? Because there is in theory a winner or winners who take some cash at the end of the game, which is a load of money. So presumably whatever profits he makes on that from, say, selling tickets.
We're gonna have a section on VIPs. So but again, very much like the commercialization of labour to foreign markets and things like that. Again, an indictment of capitalism. Now, one of the things I hear people say that it can't be a critique of capitalism because within the game, everyone is equal, and that's not capitalism. It's always okay. So people get one of the reasons it's so hard to have this conversation is because people get very, very defensive of any criticism of capitalism. Like, people think that if you have a study of the world you live in, which for most of us means a world of capitalism, if you're critiquing that, you're somehow saying communism is better, or like capitalism is irredeemable, or whatever. And whatever I think is not important. That's what people kind of assume that you're saying.
It has to be an either or, Tally.
Exactly. If you acknowledge like any criticism of capitalism, you're saying it's evil and any other system is better. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
So people get very defensive about it, and they don't willfully accept critiques of capitalism a lot of the time. And this is a great example of that. They go, no, it can't be a critique of capitalism. The writer and director is wrong, because the game, everyone is equal in the game, right, Evitel?
Yeah.
What do you think about that? That's your theory blown out of the water. Now we look stupid. Even them saying that is quite a critique of capitalism.
Exactly.
It's like, wait. The system that I'm defending here is completely unfair. The fact that this game, everyone is equal, just shows that it can't be a critique of my system, which is completely unfair and unequal. So, and this is something that is literally one of the story points of Squid Game, and something they make very, very obvious. There is a difference between saying that the game is fair and the game actually being being fair. There's a difference between saying that everyone is equal in the game and everyone actually being equal in the game.
Because, of course, everyone is not equal in the game. You have people with various, abilities of different ages.
Well, for a start, the only people that have to take part in the game are people in massive amounts of debt who have no choice, okay?
Exactly.
These don't take part in the game. Like, the VIPs don't take part in the game, with one exception. But when they do, they are under no threat of death at all. So even if a VIP does decide to take part in the game, they're not taking part on an equal footing, and they're not playing the same game. They're voyeurs, they're tourists. We see how the players of the game have no choice but to go back into what they know is a deadly, deadly situation that hardly any of them will actually make it out of on the other side. Because what other choice have they got? And in the games themselves aren't fair. And we're going to look at the games in a different section. But there's maybe half the games that you could say are skill-based, but the other half of the games are completely random.
Yeah.
There's
brute strength, and there's...
You definitely have an advantage if you're strong and fit and young, and that is acknowledged by the players in the game multiple times.
Ruthless.
Yeah, exactly. As it happens, there's much more inequality within the games than that as well. So the term equality within the Squid Game is something that is talked about, but is quite clearly not true.
Exactly.
And explicitly so. The players in the game know that, the soldiers know that, the VIPs know that. In the Stepping Stone game, where someone actually is using their skills and knowledge to have an advantage in the game, they nullify that advantage in the game. They encourage violence in the night against each other as a kind of a bonus game, which again clearly favors a certain type of person, a certain type of with certain qualities, So the idea that there is equality in the Squid Game is a complete lie, and it's supposed to be. That's not a plot hole. That's literally the story. It's the whole plot. There's the fact that a lot is kind of loaded on the policeman trying to get the message out and to get back up to the island. He actually gets to a point where he does get his message out and calls for backup, and that's the last we ever hear of it. Exactly. This idea that this thing is above the law, and they probably know about it, to a certain extent. There are people in law enforcement who know about this thing and know that you're not allowed to touch it. And very explicitly, of course, it's not the government running this thing. This is a commercial enterprise run by quite literally a capitalist and making money on a foreign market from the deaths of his own people, from the deaths of the labor force of his own country. There's no getting around the fact that this represents capitalism and class within capitalism, I would say. I think it's a really good study of class, but of course that's against the backdrop of capitalism, because that's how class in our societies manifests, right? The class system manifests in whatever economic system you've got. And in this case, it's capitalism. South Korea, like I say, has extremes of capitalism at the moment. It's got one of, if not the highest suicide rate in the world. The role of class and the economic system is a major talking point in South Korea at the moment, in South Korean society, and we see that in so much of the drama that's coming out of it, like Parasite and like Snowpiercer. It's one thing choosing not to care about that, or not noticing it, or enjoying Squid Game on your own terms or whatever, and not wanting to engage in the message at all. It's another thing to willfully misunderstand it, and unfortunately that's something we've seen quite a lot of. Section 5, misunderstanding Squid Game. The internet is made up of a lot of people, and a lot of people on the internet, particularly people who kind of talk about media and things like that, they're of a certain political bent. Sure. And why not? Everyone's right to have their own politics, right? But a lot of people, their politics is their thing. So when Squid Game came out and everyone loved it because it's very, very good, they were caught in this weird bind where, they had to love Squid Game, but also they had to come to terms with the fact that it was criticizing something that is part of their identity to a lot of people. A lot of people, it's like what I was talking about, how reluctant people are to kind of analyze or critique our economic system in any way. A lot of people have made capitalism their view of capitalism, which is often wrong anyway, but they've made that their identity and their brand, right?
It's familiar.
Yeah, exactly. And I understand that. Being asked to critique it and think about it on a level that maybe you're not used to can be quite scary. And people have reacted to it in many different ways.
They have, haven't they?
You could take the route that your Matt Walsh or your Ben Shapiros have taken, which is basically just to say you shouldn't watch Squid Game.
Clearly outing themselves as having not watched Squid Game.
Yeah. I mean, are you aware of Ben Shapiro? Do you know who he is. He's a political commentator, and he's of a certain side of the aisle, and that's fine. But apparently, Squid Game is disgusting, and you shouldn't watch it. And it's just ultra-violence. Don't watch your kids watch it. That's another thing that we've been seeing in the papers, a lot of scaremongering about kids who are watching this show, which is not for kids, and the danger it's having on kids. Because did you know, Evitel, that kids are watching Squid Game and they are reenacting the games in Squid Game, which means kids all across the world, up and down this country, as we speak, are playing kids' games.
Well. Okay, to be fair, kids should probably not be watching Squid Game.
No, but anyway, so Ben Shapiro's take was not to watch it. He said, I'm not going to watch this filth. You shouldn't watch this filth either. But then he did also release a video saying that it's definitely about communism. But also, you shouldn't watch it because it's filthy and disgusting. But also, it's definitely about communism. Trust me, bro. Then you've got the take of someone like Tim Pool talking explicitly how about, well, in the same breath, Squid Game is not overtly political, but also its message is that communism is bad.
Hold on. So it's both.
It's both. It's both and neither, I guess. I don't know. So there is a kind of like almost a cottage industry at the moment in trying to convince you that Squid Game is about communism.
Right.
Now, here's the thing, right? I'm not here to sell you communism. I don't care. The fact is, like, I'm not saying Squid Game is not about communism because I think communism is good, right? I'm saying Squid Game is not about communism because it's just not about communism in any way. It's not saying communism is good. It's not saying communism is bad. It's just not about communism. No. It's not bothered with communism. It's a study of the society in which South Koreans live, which isn't communism. It's just not about it.
I honestly think it's just like a surface level, like, I see a bread line, it's communism. I see people being handed food. They're not working for that food. I'm struggling.
But it's funny because they even go out of their way to show the democratic process in action in Squid Game as well. And the idea that, well, you can vote for one thing, but you're going to get another thing. Okay, like they vote not to have the game, and then they realize life, they have no other choice but to do the game anyway, right? We're not standing communism here, right? We're literally just saying it's not about communism in any way. There's maybe one moment where communism is even a part of the story at all. And that's where Sabyuk is talking to her emo girlfriend in the marble game, and emo girlfriend says, why did you come here? Why did you come to South Korea? And she said, I thought life would be better here. And emo girlfriend says, and is it? And she very explicitly doesn't answer. And that's not saying communism is good, right? It's just saying maybe it ain't so much better here.
Yeah, I mean, apparently like loads of her family die in a plague.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't sound like, that doesn't sound like a sparkling endorsement of communism to me, right? You have to be ignoring every single message in the show. You have to be ignoring what the writer and director of the show is telling you about it. My favourite is not even political analysis of Squid Game, though. My favourite misunderstanding of Squid Game is the Plothole articles.
Oh, boy.
So many articles and videos on YouTube talking about plot holes in Squid Game. And
now, to be fair, we have pointed out a plot hole, which I think is a legit plot
there is. I stand by it. My favourite article is the Game Rant article, which we'll link in the description below so you can read it in your own time. But I'll just give you the highlights now. Squid Game, 9 things that don't make sense about the series. The workers are mostly too obedient. Squid Game is run not just by a mysterious host, but also several workers in pink outfits and masks that cover their faces. There are a lot of plot holes and questions about who these workers are and why they would all be so incredibly obedient. If anything, they live in equally bleak circumstances, getting rid of bodies, preparing all evil games, and torturing the players with a lack of food.
Congratulations. That is an apt analysis of what the soldiers are actually going through.
Yeah, they represent the middle class. Yeah. It's like so obvious. It's like it might as well be tattooed on their faces. This is, I feel like Squid Game is kind of like a GCSE drama piece.
Wow.
So I feel like, when I was doing drama, we were into like very heavy metaphors, all right? Yeah. So, we had we did a devised piece about a religious cult, okay? Cool. So the set was all ladders and people were trying to ascend on the ladders and stuff like that. And at the end, when they all shot each other, they did ascend. Very, like, no missing that message. No. Do you know what I mean? There was one where it was about anorexia, content warning. It was about anorexia. And so we had a very thin girl girl look in the mirror, and one of like the larger girls in the class was looking back at her.
Crafty.
And I feel like Squid Game is that level of subtlety in its metaphors. I feel like we could totally have done Squid Game for a GCSE
totally
drama piece, but we might have gone full Brechtian and we might have just had middle class, right? Just in case Game Rant was there and didn't understand it. Number 5, the game killed its own contestants unfairly.
No!
Onto the list of other unfair things the game show did. Murdering one of its contestants after she won a game is a huge crime, based on their own rules and principles.
May I point out that there is no rule or principle
exactly.
that says people who win the game are immune from dying at any point?
We were just talking about how purposely unfair the game is, and like the whole point is that they tell you it's fair, and if you work hard and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, then you will be a success. Where have I heard? That's a dream.
I don't know,
but I can't remember what dream. Except that honour didn't seem to matter to the game facilitators, since it was thanks to the 4th game's glass explosion that she bled to near death. There's a plot hole in this plot hole. It's not actually what kills her.
No.
What actually kills her is Song Woo slitting her throat.
Yep.
This is my favourite. Number 2, how did a game winner end up becoming a host? Another thing that's hard to digest, or wasn't explained believably, was the host. The show revealed him to be Officer Hwang Jun-ho's brother, which is way too convenient. That's because the host was also a former contestant of the game show. That in itself is a security concern. Why is it a security concern to have people that have taken part in the game?
If anything, it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, totally. It's like the winners of the game are part of the clique now, and they can benefit from the game as much, or in their own way, right? They're not victims of the game anymore so much as they are co-conspirators in the game, like the middle classes, right? So it's actually a protection against them.
Tally, that requires like a step above extremely basic.
The last plot hole of theirs that I'll read out will lead us into our next section. Number 8. Contestant 001 really could have died. By the end of the show, it's revealed that one of the contestants, number 001, the old man, was actually a VIP. Or the main villain. He elected to join the players because he was bored out of his mind. Still, he did have a brain tumour and poor health, and this notably affected his ability to play. He really could have died in some of the games, especially the tug of war. He could have also been stabbed during the riot.
Okay.
No, he couldn't.
No.
That's the whole point of the story.
Like, he is protected from the instant it starts.
Section 6, the old man and the twist. There is a big twist in Squid Game. It's the same twist as in Saw. The old man with cancer turns out to be the one that's doing all the games.
He's running the game.
It's Saw. It's the same twist as Saw.
You saw this very early on.
I saw this incredibly early on, and there were many kind of hints to it. And there's a whole YouTube industry on pointing out hints to the old man being the
and looking
owner.
back on it now.
And there's stuff which is there with hindsight, like the fact that the red light, green light robot apparently doesn't pick him out when it's kind of doing her Terminator thing. I've heard people say that he's not clipped into the rope when they're doing tug of war. But we never spotted any of that. For me, it was more the fact that he was always really into the game, but that was understandable anyway. But there was the fact that he knew how all the games worked, and when it came to the tug of war, he knew the correct tactic to win the game as well.
Yeah, but very precisely.
We knew the owner of the game, the owner of the game is the first person that talks in Squid Game, where they're describing Squid Game right at the very beginning, where we're watching kids in old clothes play Squid Game, right? And he was talking about how much he loved Squid Game and how when he won, it felt like he owned all of the world.
Oh.
And so we know that whoever owns Squid Game, right, and whoever made these games is probably going to be quite old. So there's that. There's the fact that, he clearly calls an end to the riot. He's there and he's like, I'm scared, I want this to end. And that's when the front man says, okay, end all this. And, and so I remember just leaning to you and going, do you think the old man is in charge of it all?
And I was like, no, that's so, no.
And then
I went,
it was that thing where every other thing that happened after that.
And I was like, oh, shit. got it.
Yeah.
You did it.
It was like, yeah, sorry guys, it's definitely him.
And of course, he looked like there's like the nostalgia of all the games, right? There's a certain kind of game, like all the pieces start to add up, and you're like, okay.
I think most people may have got the twist by the time it was actually revealed.
then.
We'll talk about the last episode as well, but it makes the kind of the reveal of the old man kind of underwhelming towards the end. Actually, I think it could have been done much better. It gives Gi-hun a way to survive the games because the old man clearly takes a shine to him.
He does,
and it is kind of like a tangible reward for Gi-hun's kindness. You know. He's kind of protected through a lot of the game. Not all of it by any means, but quite a lot of it. And of course, it represents the owner, the capitalist in charge of the game, who's profiting off the game and who profits literally from the blood and violence enacted on his fellow man, the lower classes, the people who are desperate and have to do anything for money, which he has, so he can enforce violence on them, just like the incredibly handsome stranger at the train station in episode 1. You know, you have that power over people when you have capital. And that's the whole point, right?
Exactly.
So you can enact unbelievable cruelty on people and make them feel like it's their fault and it's their choice. And, you know, it's them that didn't do the system properly. But really, they have no choice if they have nothing, right? So you have like a get out of jail card, a pass to commit unspeakable cruelty and violence on people when you have the means and the capital. Obviously, he's taking part in the game with no danger to himself. As well, which is very important.
I mean, sure, you could argue that someone could stab him in the night, but he's an old man. Like
there were like 50 soldiers outside the room waiting to bust in.
Exactly. And so, like he is always going to be protected, even in the ways that we might not see or understand. Kind of like who this character actually represents, right?
Totally.
Like he has his protections. He's above the law. There are going to be things in place throughout the game, safeguards that make sure that he is A-okay.
It's just a shame that it is the same twist from Saw.
I know.
Section 7, the games. Oh, let's talk about the games.
So let's go through them.
They're super cool. Well, we've already done Red Light, Green Light, like Grandmother's Footsteps. And so there's obviously a very obvious choice in the use of children's games, right? One, it's just cool. People love games, man. That's why people love Saw. And you know, the idea of like battle royals and things in the first place. So the idea, but also there's you touched on it earlier, the idea of this kind of sepia-tinged, you know, very nostalgic, very safe.
An innocence.
An innocence which is being stripped away by the brutality of a system. Because suddenly, you know, even kind of harmless games aren't fun when death is the losing state.
These are the games we are taught to play that we take at face value and go, okay, this is fine.
Yeah, and the losing state is different for the different classes, right? So you lose the game and you're working class, you die. You lose the game and you're upper class, it's not so bad, you know? Like
it might be okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's, again, a very clear metaphor. But the games themselves are really cool.
Right.
They're one of the things that have captured the imagination of the public. Kids up and down the country are playing these games, Evitel, which is terrible news. And it was really interesting because I kind of expected after that for them all to be very physical games and for them all to, and many of them are.
Like hopscotch,
yeah, exactly. And many of them, like I expected like hopscotch but with landmines or something, which is kind of what we got in fairness
actually.
in some point. But the next one, again, undermining maybe our expectations slightly, was the honeycomb game. And this is one of the ones that has absolutely captured the imagination.
Oh my God, I saw so many honeycomb games over Halloween, like on Instagram.
Oh, wow,
like, everyone was playing honeycomb games.
And it's not just like the cool kids of TikTok who are doing honeycomb games.
It's
also like massive corporations. So especially like car corporations, because it's a really easy one to put like a corporate logo into the honeycomb, you know, and go, oh, look everyone. And suddenly we're being sold cars by Squid Game, and it's kind of weird, especially because Gi-hun worked for a car plant and that's why he's so traumatized.
Exactly.
Great.
So the honeycomb game, right, is the one where you have to kind of very delicately extract a shape from melted sugar, honeycomb, using a little toothpick or a needle without breaking it. If you break it, if it shatters, you die.
And that's the thing I loved about the honeycomb game, apart from the whole build-up to it, where some people suspected what it was and knew how to kind of mitigate the worst of it by getting an easier shape sort of thing. And that's where we first see Song-woo about to warn Gi-hun about the door that he's standing by, because Gi-hun is standing next to the umbrella, which is the hardest shape. Song-woo knows what the game is, so he's like, Gi-hun, oh, never mind. It's because, you get rid of a contestant. That's good news for you. And so that's his ruthlessness coming through straight away. Or maybe the first real hint that he has no problem
it's like
with.
He's had to make a decision.
Yeah.
And you see him make the decision and you go, ooh.
But that game, as presented in the show, was one of the most nerve-wracking ones, because it's very kind of cerebral and personal. And
well, it has that thing like when you're a kid, when you're focusing really, really hard on something, when you're like drawing something really small, and seeing everyone suddenly go very, very quiet, focus on like not breaking their honeycombs was really brilliant.
In some of the games, it's the game that kills you.
Yes.
But in I think the most effective games in this show, you lose the game and there's this moment, there's this time in between you losing the game, you realizing you've lost the game, and you see the brain go through the stages of grief, denial, and how do I get out of this, and then like pleading, and you've snapped it, you look up, you see that the soldier has seen that you've snapped it, and there's this kind of bargaining stage where you go, no, I mean, come on, and then you get shot in the head. So there's, and that happens in the marble game. The best games for me were the ones that the game didn't kill you, you lost the game, and then there was a little bit of time, and then, it was the soldier that killed you. Yeah. And that's where we actually see one of the soldiers die in that game as well, because someone has the chance to, they're so upset and they're so terrified because they know, that doom, you're looking death right in the face in that situation, and steals the gun and makes him take his mask off, and the soldier has to be killed. And that's, a soldier that we see die. So the middle class aren't immune from the danger, but they are certainly spared from it being part of their everyday. Yeah, they don't have to play the game, right? The old man does say that Gi-hun saved his life in that game, but I think we all know that's not true.
Exactly. And I love it as a moment of like Gi-hun's kind of like brilliant creativity that comes out in moments where you're like...
Well, he is incredibly resourceful and has a lot of initiative.
Exactly.
Maybe it wasn't his fault that his business has failed, because, he certainly shows a lot of qualities that you'd expect,
So after the honeycomb candy episode, there's the fight, the midnight fight.
Oh, that's like a bonus game, isn't it, really? Where they starve the contestants, and then, it's revealed that if you kill someone in the dorms, that's okay.
It's fair game.
It doesn't matter.
And it happens at night, right, when people are sleeping. And like that felt like one moment of safety when everyone was like, whew, we finished the game for the day. Let's eat our bun and go to sleep and have a rest. And now they take that away. Yeah. So you have no safety. I mean, there's probably something there about, how capitalism has us working 24/7, and the instant you stop or let down your guard, you die. I mean, I don't know, maybe.
Well, it's also turning the working class against each other.
Exactly.
It's clear who the real enemy is in that situation. It's the people that aren't feeding you properly. But it's, everyone's attention was turned on each other. And, they were teaming up to kill each other and blaming each other. Whereas, it was clearly none of their faults, sort of thing, which is really interesting as well. The tug of war was the only game that expanded over 2 episodes. Yeah. Because you had that quite literal cliffhanger. And that was a horrifying game. That was one of the most gruesome games, even though you never actually you only ever saw the result of the violence. Like in the other games, you see people getting shot in the head in real time. Like you see it happen. But in the tug of war, you see people get pulled over the edge, and then you just hear a bunch of splatting, and then you might get a kind of a pan over them and see them from a distance.
Of like a little truck hauling their bodies away.
Oh, man.
Like,
and that
really
I found that like terrifying. And that's one of the ones that I think about a lot in terms of just the pure horror of it, And this idea that it's another one where you kind of know you're losing. Yeah. There's a moment where you've lost, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you're just getting pulled over the edge. And it's like the thing that I found most effective about Squid Game, and this is a word I have used before, but is the inevitability of so much of it. And I feel like the tug of war definitely had an inevitability.
Yeah, and there's also that element in that, like, if one person on your team messes up, if someone makes a mistake, you all pay for it. You have no choice, and you all go down together, and it's so cruel.
And I know that they win that game through like clever tactics, because the old man knows the best stances to take and the best tactic. But then Song-woo comes up with an amazing plan when they're losing and what have you.
Exactly.
But still a game that clearly favours strength and agility and just, youth. And they know it, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, they might have bucked the trend on their round, but you kind of sense every other round went to just like the big strong dudes, right? It was certainly the case with the gangster guy and his big like burly team who won without really breaking a sweat. There was like they didn't need clever tactics.
Brute force.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And then came the game, which I think is the episode that this show will be remembered for, which is the marbles game.
Oh.
And I think when I think of Squid Game and when I think of Squid Game being good, I think of episode 2 and how it undermined my expectations about everyone going home and then coming back to the game of their own accord, as it were. But I also think of the marbles game because for me it had the best writing, the best character development, the best character moments, like the most drama and the most emotional punch as well.
Wait, you don't think the last episode was the best? Anyway, we'll get to that.
Dot Cotton's Revenge? No.
Yeah, so the marbles game was brilliant because first there was the whole setup where you have to choose your partner. So there's the decision that people make right away, which is, am I choosing a partner to collaborate with or to kill?
And in every situation when you've had to choose a team before, it has been people that you've been teamed up with. So you were picking the strongest people, you were picking the cleverest people.
Right.
As such, no one wants the old man, right? No one wants him or the annoying woman. I've seen theories that the old man is trying not to be picked because he knows it's an odd number and he'll just go straight through to the next round.
Right.
But Gi-hun's natural decency and kindness sees him making a sacrifice in a way to kind of team up with the old man. And this is a really interesting one because we've talked a lot about Gi-hun's decency and his kindness towards the old man. Actually, he wouldn't have won without being really quite shitty in this game, which is what comes down to. And he was sad about it.
Yeah.
He knew it was wrong. He knew it was bad. He didn't want to do it.
But he did it.
He still did it. He still lied. He still cheated.
Yeah.
He still fundamentally cheated because he saw that was the only way that he could possibly survive.
Exactly. And you see this play out on his face throughout the whole thing when he makes the decisions to dupe the old guy. And it's horrible to watch.
And
right?
it's beautiful performances as well.
Yeah, and it's because it's this character that you've begun to sympathize with, and you're like, he's done lots of good things, but even him,
and he is the moral center of the show.
Exactly. He can be ambiguous, but there's ultimately a core of good. Even him, when it comes down to your life or someone else's, and that's the thing. That's what this game comes down to. Is it you or them? As you see portrayed with the married couple. Which I think about all the time. I think about it all the time.
What would you do?
Okay. So, at first, I'm like, okay, it would be really nice of you to let me live, right?
I would obviously just let you live. Right. I'd obviously just lose. Obviously, I would.
However, I don't think I would want to live. I think I would want you to let me die because I think it would be horrible to come out of that as the person who lives.
Yeah, but at the same time, you want me to live for quite selfish reasons. Whereas I just want you to live because I love you. I'm the only one making a sacrifice here.
But look, if you wanted to live...
Okay, well, I guess that's slightly different, but I know I would not. In that situation, obviously, I'd let you live. Or I'd let you live. Maybe you'd probably beat me in the game fair and square, to be honest. So at least I keep some kind of ego by going, I'm going to let you win.
Yeah, down to your last words.
But one of the things I think about a lot with the married couple, where, the husband comes out of it. We don't see the game.
No,
we don't see what happens,
do.
but we know that the husband survives and his wife dies. And, I was thinking, in that situation, I would have let my wife win. There's no way that I am walking out of that game. You are walking. I would have done what Emo Girlfriend does, and I would lose the game on purpose. There's no two ways about it. For you, I would do that. Of course I would. Anyone else, I'm going to cheat and lie. But you, I'm going to let you win.
Thanks,
and I'm like, so why didn't that happen? Because they clearly love each other.
Yeah.
They are teaming up together, and so why did he come out? And the only thing I can think of is that they were like, only one of us is going to come out of the Squid Game anyway. And we've already established that actually men who are strong have an advantage in many of these games. So you know what? You've got more chance of actually winning the game than I have.
Yeah.
So you've got more chance of surviving overall. If one of us is only going to survive anyway, you've got the most chance. And I can imagine that that was like the wife's reasoning.
Or...
Because I can't imagine they actually just fought to the death.
Exactly.
I can't imagine that. It would have been something that they decided.
They made a choice. Or she was like, look, I don't want to live if you die. right? I don't want to continue living. However, I don't want to have to kill myself. So
okay, yeah.
I'm going to leave that to
Well, he does
you.
end up killing himself. Of course.
Exactly.
Either way, it's just incredibly sad. It's
Yeah.
really horrible. I think one of the games that everyone remembers the most is Song-woo and Ali. Because this is a relationship that it seemed very one-sided. And you're kind of not surprised by it by that point. You know, you've seen enough of Song-woo to know that even though he had been legitimately incredibly kind to Ali outside of the game, in the game he's clearly a different person for obvious reasons.
Yeah, of course.
But the way he does
it, and the extreme cruelty of how he goes about it, right? So they choose a game of chance, like finance can be to some degree, right?
Yeah.
And Song-woo starts losing his marbles, right?
Well, he's lost. He actually loses his last marble. He just doesn't hand it over.
Exactly. He loses the game, and being the strategic guy he is, he decides to twist things in his favor and manipulate Ali so that it looks like Song-woo wins. But the thing that killed me about this is that there are many ways that he could have done it, but it really shows how he has taken advantage of Ali's kind of goodness and trust to like its full force, because he's like, hey, why don't you, I'm just going to take my shirt off. Why don't you, let's do this. Let's strategize together. Let's make a plan together. You're in on this just as much as I am. And let's do this right. And you go do this thing. I'll go take care of this thing. We'll meet up right at the end, and then it's going to be all okay. But we are doing this together. Like the extent to which he goes, because he probably could have done it in a more simple way.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah.
the thing,
It's like
because,
so extravagant.
Ali is so gullible. He could have done it in a more simple way, but the extent to which he manipulates him is so cruel. And of course, does it so that he doesn't have to watch Ali die.
Yeah. And he can just walk away.
And he can literally walk away.
So he doesn't even have to look him in the face.
Oh, it was horrible.
Yeah,
Oh,
that kind of detachment was really horrible. And then you saw like the opposite of that, which was the sexy emo girlfriends.
Yeah.
Which was the match made in heaven from the very second.
You knew it was going to happen.
The second that they saw each other when she enlisted her into the tug of war game. You know, the second you saw her sitting there, this is the ship that I've been waiting for this entire show. And so when they were together for the marbles game, if the Song-woo Ali matchup was maybe the best written piece of drama in that episode, I feel like the conversation between those two, between the two girls, was very much kind of what I think about a lot from that episode, and just seeing, you know, these two people who are in this situation through no fault of their own, either of them, you know, and who have seen incredible hardship, the both of them, and gone through some like horrible things.
Yeah, but I loved that. And of course, you know, one, you know, represents North Korea, one represents South Korea, but also like they're two young women, like they're two young girls who have been faced with like inexplicable horror
and growing up too soon, maybe you could say as well, like forced into kind of a maturity that is, they shouldn't have to, you know. The North Korean girl's left looking after her younger brother, and having to provide for him when she's a teenager herself, and the other person had to, like, you know, get out of an abusive household and deal with that situation, you know, in the way that she did.
Yeah, and like they've both seen parents die. Like they have both watched one of their parents die, and watching Ji-young being like holding off the game and making her own decision along the way that she was going to sacrifice herself. Like, but her coming to those terms over the course of a conversation with another young woman, I thought it was
it's kind of an act of like some kind of autonomy and taking back some power.
Yeah, she does make a choice. But
it's a no-win, isn't it? Anyway, the Marbles episode was the best episode in the show for me. I don't think it ever reached those peaks again. I don't think it ever really could. And I don't think that's necessarily a criticism. It's just like that was a really kind of obvious.
It was like the pinnacle of the trying.
Yeah, exactly. And but then we had the stepping stone game, which is a completely random game, because the marble game could be random or not, depending on what
you choose your
the participants chose. Yeah, exactly. And you know, there's open for manipulation and interpretation there as well. The stepping stone game, flat out complete randomness. You had like the illusion of choice where you chose whether you started at the beginning or the end, but of course if you don't know the game, that's no choice at all.
There's randomness, there's cruelty. Some of the stepping stones are like reinforced plexiglass that won't break. Others will shatter the instant you step on them. There's this whole thing about like walking this invisible path too, right ahead of you, which like
and not even knowing when you're misstepping.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, sure.
So heavy. They're right there. It opens with you having to choose whether you want to begin or be at the end of the line. You don't know what the game is when you make that choice.
And Gi-hun absolutely originally picks the first vest and is convinced to swap to the last one.
Exactly.
And a complete chance, you know, and it's horrifying and it's incredibly tense and it's incredibly well done. It's where Gangster Guy and Annoying Woman die as well. And in fact, everyone else apart from our triumvirate. And like I say earlier, it's an example where we see that's the first one that the VIPs actually turn up for.
Yes.
And it's an example where we see them specifically not caring about the contestants. So like I say, in Battle Royale, in Running Man, in Hunger Games, a common thread that they have is that there's an investment from the audience in the contestants. You know, obviously in Hunger Games they're cheering for their own side. In Running Man, you know, you choose your favourite one and they can win prizes for you and stuff like that. You know, in Squid Game, there's not that engagement in the actual players from the VIPs. They're interested in the game and they're interested in the cruelty of the game, and it is just entertainment to them. And yeah, they bet on random numbers,
bets,
but they choose them randomly. Like the one we see putting a bet on, he chooses because he likes the funny number, not because he's invested in the actual person.
What's
right?
the funny number, Tally?
Of course, I'm gonna pick 69.
Oh, you dirty, decadent old man.
And you know, the second someone actually does start showing their own personality and character in that game,
and they're like,
they nullify it and they wipe it out. Yeah, so it's really interesting that for them it really is the game. And it's a cruel game, even as pointed out by that excellent Game Rant article. Even when the game's complete, someone still has like a mortal injury that gets inflicted upon them.
How unfair!
Even though they was plot hole, if you ask me.
How grossly
massive
unfair.
Plot hole.
That goes against the like, you know, the
and then of course,
Constitution.
but of course, she is then killed sort of outside of the game by Sung-woo. And then the final game is the Squid Game itself, which, despite the obvious kind of parallels of the shape of the Squid Game and what that obviously represents, still don't quite understand it. But it's essentially British Bulldogs, isn't it? You've just got to get past someone. And again, it's a pure like strength game.
Force.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
If I played that in school, I know exactly who would have kicked my ass in that game.
Yeah, I know.
And they know too.
Yeah.
Anyone from my old school watching this game, you know you'd have kicked my ass in that game.
Like, you can only be so sneaky in
yeah,
that game.
yeah,
You can
totally.
only evade so much before you die.
And it just did come down to a lot of punching and a lot of grappling and a lot of stabbing with the steak
dinner knives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it was our final show of how the kindness of Gi-hun as well.
Yeah, because at the end, Gi-hun kind of gets the advantage over Sung-woo, and he makes the choice.
He's about to step over the line. He's about to win the game.
He's going to win the game. It would be so easy, and he makes the choice even when it's down to just the two of them, where it's the price is like, do you pay with someone's life and run away with huge sums of money, or do you give it up completely?
And he says, let's vote to end this game.
Yeah.
And we won't get any money, but we'll both survive. Had to lie and cheat and kill an old man to get there. But, you know, his favourite old man, like one of the only people he actually liked in the entire game, had to kill that guy and lie and cheat to do it. But, you know, he's still a good person. When he had the choice of surviving with someone else, like, the money isn't important to him at that point.
Exactly.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any pretense that these games are fair or equal or kind of meritocratic.
Absolutely not.
You know, there are certain kind of qualities that it's good to have in these games, but there's also enough randomness about them that you can't call it a meritocracy in any way.
No.
You can't say the most deserving person wins. You can't say the most skillful person wins, or the strongest person wins.
Yeah.
Or anything. You know, it's there are certain things that give you an advantage, but there's so much randomness about it. Talking about the nostalgia of kids games. games and how they're safe, and that the brutality of a system that is imposed on that game takes away the safety and therefore the enjoyment of the game as well. The only person that ever enjoys the game is the old man. That's because he knows he doesn't face the danger from it.
Exactly.
And Sung-woo actually says pretty much as much before he stabs himself. And he says, you know, we used to play these games and our mothers would always call us inside at the end of the day. No one calls us inside anymore.
No.
You know, there's no one to protect you. Once your childhood is over and you're out in this system and this world, it is ruthless and it is dog eat dog, and the fail state is death.
Yeah.
And that's kind of incredibly sobering. It's impossible to enjoy any kind of perks of a system where the fail state is death.
Yeah.
It's always that thing where people go, well, horses love racing. Horses love racing. It's like, I love racing as well. But if I knew that I was going to get shot in the head if I fell over and broke my leg, I probably wouldn't like racing so much.
And of course, we think back to Gi-hoon gambling.
Yeah, exactly. On the horses.
On the horses'
exactly.
lives, right?
Exactly.
So, and there is something, I don't know, maybe a bit poetic about Sung-woo choosing to take his own life because, you know, as a guy who works in finance, who's handling the big sums, who rather than face those consequences chooses to die. I mean, suicide is a huge thing among those circles.
Very good point. It's also worth noting, it's not a game where there is, I said there was a 1 in 450 shot, but actually it's much less than that, because in pretty much any of those games, there's not guaranteed to be any survivors.
That's true.
There's not guaranteed to be a survivor of red light, green light.
Everyone
They could all die.
In the first game.
Exactly. They could all die straight up. There's not guaranteed to be any survivors in the honeycomb game. They could all muck it up. They could all die. There are guaranteed survivors in the tug of war. There's guaranteed survivors in the marble game, sure, but there's not guaranteed survivors in stepping stones by any means. They could all easily die.
No, they all could have gone.
So over half the games. Could wipe out the entire, you know, so it's not like there is always going to be a winner.
No.
In fact, I imagine there's been loads of Squid Games where everyone has died, maybe even the majority.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of part of the underlying cruelty.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
like,
for sure.
You're tempted with this prize, but it's possible that no one gets it anyway.
Interesting. Section 8, the VIPs and why they're terrible.
Oh.
Okay, a lot has been said about this. We're not going to dwell on it because I like Squid Game a lot, but I think most people agree that the weakest part of Squid Game is the VIPs.
Yeah, the kind of last two-ish
They're
episodes
really
from there.
bad. They're just really bad. I liked it when they turned up and they were definitely coded as like American and foreigners and foreign investors and things like that. I liked the principle of them, but the whole kind of weird sort of Illuminati decadence vibe didn't quite kind of do it for me.
No.
And I feel like it could have worked. There's nothing wrong with the idea as such. It's just almost just in the application of it.
It was a bit too on the nose for me.
I mean, for me, it wasn't even the heavy-handedness of the message because it's Squid Game. I'm quite used to that. It was the acting. So I get the feeling that these lines were written in Korean and then translated. And I get the feeling they were translated on Google Translate. And I get the feeling that after Google Translate, they were given to another person to translate again into a different language. And I feel like they were put into Google Translate again. And only then were they allowed to say them.
Yeah, that is my favourite Squid Game, actually. That should have been a Squid Game.
And like, I've read interviews with the American actors in that show, and they were like, we had no idea what was going on.
Okay.
Like, I'm proud to be part of this great show.
Yeah.
Now I've seen it. But when we got there, you know, they're sitting miles away from each other for a start. They've got apparently they were given very little context. Okay. Not many people on the set spoke English. Okay. So they were kind of left to their own devices, and you know, the acting isn't great.
It's not great. I mean,
and the lines are really clunky. Hey, how much money did you lose betting on that guy?
Okay, I'm going to enjoy my other pleasures.
Yeah,
so the way they were portrayed, I'm with you.
I didn't love it
in principle, but I thought the
it kind of really took
me
out of it. Yeah.
If anything, actually, I think I think what would have really been more like impactful for those guys is for them to like not make a big fuss about it, because they had this huge,
absolutely.
They had a huge
I completely
party.
agree. It was too much of a special event.
Exactly, it was a special event. They're VIPs at the special event. They paid the money. They're doing it. They're here. They've got naked ladies as furniture everywhere. They're having people, drop grapes into their mouths. What would have been really cruel is if they were just like watching it on Netflix or something.
I agree with you. I think it would have been much more effective if we'd seen one of them watching it on their phone as they were taking a dump.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how much they care. And then the game ends and everyone's dead and they're like, okay, cool. Right. I get that would have been hard harder to portray the message of Squid Game, I guess, but I think it'd be more effective from a dramatic point of view. It's almost an occasion where the social critique of Squid Game kind of got in the way of storytelling a little bit. They don't shy away from some proper like Illuminati imagery as well. In fact, Section 9, Illuminati imagery. There's loads of Illuminati imagery in it as well. It's not just,
Does there have to be?
Well, it doesn't matter. There just is. I've been reading a lot about this because people who don't want to talk about its critique of capitalism often focus on the Illuminati side of it.
Right.
As you'd imagine. But there is loads of it in there. There's a very famous image of one of the Rothschilds in like the 50s or 60s wearing a glittery stag mask, kind of exactly like one of the masks that the VIPs wear, right? At kind of like a costume ball sort of thing, which people always point to. There's the bit where they're having the steak dinner after the stepping stone game, the triumvirate, the final three, and the table is in a triangle, and there are torches placed where the torches would be on the side of the pyramid in an Illuminati symbol. The floor is checked like it would be underneath, and there's like a whole bunch of candles or lights right in the middle of the triangle as well. So it's just a recreation of the Illuminati symbol, basically. When Ji-hoon receives the card to go and meet the old man in the final episode, he's told to go and meet him in a building which is called the Sky Building on the 7th floor, which represents 7th heaven. It's where the most exalted angels dwell, right?
Okay.
So there is a lot of this imagery in there.
Fine.
And okay, fine, whatever.
It's not my favorite.
Section 10. Season 2. Okay, so I said that the marble episode was my favourite.
Yeah.
And I very much enjoyed the stepping stone episode as well.
It's quite good.
So how do you think the season played out? How did it stick the landing?
The last episode kind of petered out for me, and I really feel like it could have ended earlier than it did.
Oh man, it could have ended just with him kind of going to the bank machine, putting the card in, seeing all the money, and he's just still very sad. He could have even left the card in the machine and just walked away.
Exactly.
And that would have told us everything that the last half hour of the show did tell us.
Exactly. I didn't need it to be told to me so explicitly. Happy with all those messages being like hammered home throughout, honestly.
Just to make Tim Pool look stupid.
Yes, but I felt like I could have done without the end, and I could have, maybe there was a way to reveal the old man as the kind of the head honcho in a different way.
But I see why they wanted a conversation between Ji-hoon and contestant number 1.
Yeah.
I see why that seemed like a good idea.
Yeah.
In hindsight, it would have been much more effective just to show him in the suit watching the last game.
Yeah.
You know, when Ji-hoon wins the last game and the VIP's like, the game is over. Well, time to get back to my life. And then if they just shown the old man watching as well, you know, that's because we all get why he would have taken part in the game.
Exactly.
We all understand who he is and what he represents. I didn't learn anything about the old man from that conversation.
I didn't need that explained to me. Exactly. And like the kind of game they play watching kind of the homeless person and whether he will die or not on the street.
Felt very tacked on.
I also,
I feel like maybe that was there because at the end, of course, we see Gi-hoon become Dot Cotton and dye his hair red. And
why does he do that, Tally?
Okay, it's apparently very symbolic of rebirth.
Okay.
I've been reading up on it. I had no idea why it was the case at first.
Like the colour.
Yeah. I've been reading up on it, and red is in some examples a symbol of rebirth, and that's kind of what he represents for him there. He does just look like Dot Cotton. It's fine. It's absolutely okay. I don't mind. But anyway, he does it. He's rich now. He's got red hair. He's been reborn.
But he's not touching his money.
No, but it is kind of the conversation with the old man and that game that they play with the old man, because I've thought about it a lot, and I guess it is, in terms of like the piece, it was important for the old man to be wrong about something, and for Gi-hoon to see the old man be wrong about something, because he's like, no one's going to come and help that guy,
right?
And I think Gi-hoon, when the old man has just died and he sees someone come and help the person on the street, he says, you saw that, didn't you? You were wrong, like you lost. And so that's almost like his spur, like this can be beaten, like these guys can be wrong, and maybe that's the thing that kind of at the end of it all inspires him to go, no, I can beat this, I can bring these people to justice. The old man was wrong. He doesn't know everything.
Right.
He's not in control of
Yeah,
everything.
and it doesn't matter whether the old man was alive to see it or not.
Yeah,
'cause
exactly.
presumably he died.
Exactly.
It just matters that Gi-hoon sees it and that he gets that moment of maybe I'll do something. We don't know if he's going to do something until, of course, he does the phone call.
And I think that's probably why that scene is in there. Apart from just having the cool payoff of maybe people don't know the old man is here's the twist. And I think they just wanted a character moment of having those two together to have like a heart to heart. I don't think it needed it. So here's the thing: at the end, once he has kind of got over it and picked up the money, he's still clearly haunted by the Squid Game. He sees another guy getting slapped by the incredibly handsome man. So handsome. He's getting slapped, but he can't take his eyes off him because he's just so handsome. He's like, oh, you're so handsome. I don't even mind. Slap me harder, Daddy. Yeah. But he's so angry that the game is still happening. And obviously that's another spur to him kind of abandoning his family to try and take down this game. Or is it that he's addicted to the game? I don't really buy that. I've read that as a theory. But either way, the season ends with him, the show ends as far as we know it, with him about to get on the plane to see his family. And he's rich now.
You can do it.
And instead turning around and being like, I'm going to take you down. I will find you and I will kill you. And getting all like Liam Neeson on the ass. That clearly opens the way to season 2, right? And how do you feel about that?
I don't want it.
No, me neither.
I don't want it. And because...
it would be rubbish, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
How would season 2 even work?
Exactly. And I don't even want to think about it because this is just his own kind of self-contained story, just very neat and apart from the end going a little bit off in some directions, which I didn't think it had to. Like, I thought it was just a really, really nice contained story. Like it taught me a lot. I got my like lessons from it, and I'm trying to imagine what season 2 could be. And is it like Gi-hoon trying to exact revenge?
Well, the host is in charge of the game now, I guess.
Yeah,
he's kind of stepped up and taken over.
Is this Gi-hoon seduced by the game? Like, I don't care. I actually don't. I kind of want it to end there because I have plenty to chew on and think about from what I've just seen. Of course, I'll watch it. God, if it comes out.
I'll watch it, but my tolerance will be quite low. I think.
With you.
It wouldn't take much to stop me watching season 2.
Yeah, kind of like...
Altered Carbon.
Oh, no!
We loved season 1 of Altered Carbon, and within an episode and a half of season 2, we were like, no, it's fine. We just don't need to watch this,
enough.
right?
Yeah, literally. Sometimes one is enough.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is going to be a second season, though, isn't there? There's no way. No way with all the money it's made and everything that they're not going to have a second season. They won't let that happen. I mean, obviously, it doesn't have to be, but I kind of feel like, ironically, in a world in the capitalist society we live in, it's just not going to be allowed to be this perfect thing. It's going to kind of have to be drawn out and potentially ruined so that a bunch of people can make a whole bunch of money.
And you know what? I'm just going to consume it.
I'll consume the heck out of it. Some of it, maybe. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But thank you for joining us for our first, maybe last video on this channel. I guess we'll see how it goes. It's been a long one, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Are they all going to be like this?
I don't know. Depends on your stamina.
Thank you for joining us. The set didn't fall down. Everything seems to have gone extremely well.
I was going to knock on wood, but I don't want to mess up the sound.
It will die. If you knock on wood, this picture falls down, these lights will come down around us. No. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our patrons who make all of our work possible. From me, Taliesin.
And me, Evitel.
Until next time, cheerio.